Alright, so welcome to my Maxtraq digitizing tutorial. Maxtraq is a digitization software produced by Innovisions out of Michigan. This allows you to import an AVI file, digitize and export kinematic data using either an ASCII or a C3D file. So first off, what I want to go ahead and do is I want to go ahead and share with you the different panels that you see in front of you. It begins with the toolbars up top. You have the drop-down toolbars here. And right beneath that you will have your quick command key bar here. These are all blacked out right now, but as you go ahead and import a video, those will all become active icons. On the right hand side here you do have your digitizing command window. Below that you will have your digitizing icons, and then here we have our video properties that you import. The very bottom of the main screen, this is going to be your video controls, and then the big screen here in the center, that's going to be your imported video file that you're going to digitize. So what I want to do first is share with you how to create a template file, which allows you to open up AVI files and not have to do the next process time and time again. It's going to save you time in the long run. So there's three ways to open up an AVI file. You can go File, Open. You can do the Control O, or you can do what I do and just go down there for you. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to get to where my file is located. So let me get there right now. Alright, so now I'm importing my file. Here we are. So the goal is I'm not going to do anything with the image right now. I'm not going to scale it. We'll talk about that later when we open that file. But what I want to do is I want to create the points, the angles, and the distance tools, so I don't have to do that every time I open a file. Okay, so I'm going to create 4 points, 2 angles, and 2 distances for our pleasure. So let me go ahead and increase this to 4. You see all the 4 points. Now there are 2 ways to rename this. You can right click, click rename. My computer for some reason doesn't like this tool, so I'm going to just single click on there one time and go ahead and label. So I'm going to label each one of these. And the important part, what this allows us to do is make sure that each one of my columns in my output data are going to be the same representation all the time. So every time these 2 columns would be thigh XY, knee XY. Now that I created the 4 points in this list, I now have to transfer those to my image. I can't create the angle or the distance tools without the points being digitized on the frame. So what I want to do is click digitize. You'll see it turn screen, indents, and then the other icons become activated. I'm also going to do add a point, because what this allows me to do is it allows me to, as I click thigh, it automatically moves to knee, waiting for me to click knee. As I click knee, it does the same, waiting for me to click ankle. So it goes just down the line, and it saves me from having to go back and forth from click a point to click what it is. And in the long run, it saves you a little time. So I'm going to go ahead and digitize. Now for now, I'm not being too specific and too worried about actually hitting the proper spot, because I'm just trying to label these right now. I'm trying to give my angle tools and distance tools something to grab onto. So I'm going to go ahead and take the digitizing off, and then I'm going to drop down to angle so you can see that there are no current angles listed. To create the angle, I'm going to go to the quick command window, and this is my angle tool here. As I drop that down, you'll see there are 3 possible angles to create. A 4-point, I've never done a 4-point, but here's your layout. A 3-point, which we know as a relative angle or a joint angle, and then you have a 2-point, which we know as an absolute angle or a segment angle. So I'm going to start with a 3-point. Now what I want you to know is if they've spent some time here to tell you A, B, C. So that's the order in which you want to digitize your points if you want the included angle between BC and BA. If I went C, BA, the angle would be on the outside. It would represent the outside of that, so the larger angle. So pay attention to the direction and what angle you actually want to digitize. So I'm going to do a 3-point. Now I'm looking for this flexion angle here. So I'm going to start here with the ankle. Now it's important that you, as you do the digitizing of the angles and the points now, that you keep the sound on. It won't count unless you click to the very center and you'll hear a beep. Do not move to the next point until you hear that beep. Otherwise you'll just have to delete your angle, which you do simply by right clicking up here and deleting the angle. You can also rename the angle and add another angle. But what I'm going to do to add an angle is I'm going to go up here because I want to do 2-point now. So I want to do the segment angle of the foot. And here you go, A, B. If I went A, B, the relative or the right horizontal is going to be at the distal section. And then you have the counterclockwise. If I go B, A, the right horizontal is going to be in the proximal end. And so the joint is going to be larger, or the angle is going to be larger. Pardon me, not the joint. So click OK, and then what I want to do is go A, B, and you'll see that I have the angle that I'm looking for. Okay. I can go through again and name these. This I'm going to name knee, and we'll name this foot. And so the next thing we're going to do is distance tools. Again, you see there's no distance sets already included, but what I'm going to do is go to this distance tool, and you have the option of 1 point in the origin and 2 points. Now your screen's origin is automatically set into this left corner. You can change that if you want with one of the up top, one of the settings you can change the origin, but we're going to keep it at the center over there. Now the 1 point is going to measure the distance from 1 point, say marker 1 or the thigh, to that origin throughout the entire time that it has been digitized. 2 points would be if I wanted to do thigh and ankle and how they relate to each other throughout the motion. So let me show you the 1 tool. I just click once right in the center. The 2 point, I gotta click on both markers. Now I thought I clicked the 1 and didn't make a sound, so I go back and then there's the tool. And I can label these if I want. Rename, nope. Alright, so I know this doesn't represent center mass, but we'll just call it that just for giggles. So now what I've done is I've actually created my points, my angles, and my distances. What I don't want is I don't want to leave this frame digitized, because if I take this and save it as a template file and open up another AVI file, it will have these digitized in this position, even if it's not relative to where the position of the leg is at that point. Now, this is frame 0, so if I open up my file and I'm at frame 0, I can automatically see that. But if, say this is at frame 694, and I don't pass 694, so I don't know this is digitized there, it's going to report it in my output data, and it may affect my analysis later on. So I want to make sure that that data is removed. To do this, all you have to do is clear all the points. The angles and the distance markers or tools will remove themselves when you remove the point. So you right click, clear point. Do not delete point, because it'll delete the point altogether, and you have to go back in and create the point one more time. So as I clear point, you see how everything moves. And again, you want to right click in the center, otherwise you get that other pop-up. You get this pop-up if you don't hit the center. Alright, so now I've created everything. I'm going to save this as a template file. So I go save as. I got the drop down template MQT. It wants to automatically save it as MQF, which is just a regular Maxtraq file, but I want a template file. And then I'm going to go ahead and create this and call this and put it in the location I would like. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and close this out. I don't want to save that. And then I'm going to show you how you would open up the template file and file. So I'm going to go up to File, Open. I could have done the other way as well. And I'm going to search for all files within this area. So you see these MQT files. So this is the one I want. I open that, and what it's going to do is going to ask me to open up the AVI file that I'm looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and open up this one. And you'll see what happens is I have my points, angles, and distance already here. So that's a good sign. I'm ready to go. So now what I need to do is when I'm ready to actually digitize for data, I need to create this image as the best possible to visualize my markers. And so you'll see these are the markers that I'll be digitizing. These aren't the best for Maxtraq. Maxtraq really works best off high contrast. These are actually used for the Vicon data collection, but I'm using this for these purposes because it's a good video. The other thing you're going to notice is there's no scaling tool immediately in the field of view, and we'll discuss that here. But to get this field of view in kind of the right lighting that I want to do and the right contrast of the markers, you have kind of 4 tools. We can adjust the brightness in conjunction with the contrast, kind of get where we want. You'll see this video is in color. If I don't want color, I can create black and white. Right. The other tool that we have available is up on the command window, and that is going to be this photo invert. And now what the photo invert is anything black is going to become white, anything white is going to become black, and then all the gray in the background is going to become another shade of gray. Let me show you how that works. So sometimes this makes it easier to see certain markers, like this dye marker definitely was easier to see this way, right? So I can go color, and now with the color, the photo invert's really interesting. So you see the blue countertop and the orange cabinets. As I invert, they switch colors. The blue is now the cabinets, and the orange is now the countertop. Another tool is you flip it back and forth. You can rotate. Those are all tools you can play around with. But I'm just going to go ahead and find. So now I got the image to where I want it. As far as the lighting goes, as far as the contrast of the markers. The next step is to do that scaling factor. And what I'm discussing there is you'll see that these numbers appear in the corners. So the 000 that represents the origin. Up here you're going to see a 486 and a 644. Now you can't really see that 46, but why I know that's 46 is because right now we're representing what is our resolution, and we're representing it. So if I go up and turn the graph on as pixels, so this image and anything we digitize currently is going to be reported as pixels. Well, we don't want to report things as pixels, and that is why we do that scaling tool within our field of view, really close to the plane of travel. What I've done is I've actually measured the distance from here to here on the treadmill, which is where I can use my scaling. It's pretty close. And so what I'll do is this is the scaling tool. The gauge length is what I'm going to measure as far as the distance goes, and then this is what units you're in. I measured in millimeters, and I measured 1,322. Now you'll see on the bottom of the cursor a little image appears, and it's like a black and yellow checkered a ruler or tape measure. And so I'm going to digitize these 2 points, and now you'll see my scaling tool. One side note with the scaling tool, it's very important that you do not put it in a field of view. So I wouldn't want it any higher than where it is, because as I'm going to digitize a foot, if that comes through that path, I won't be able to see that and digitize it. I'll have to clear this for a second and go from there. So if you right click on that, you can delete the scale, save the scale, and do some of the properties, which is basically the properties, as you see, is what you had there before. So a couple things. Now that I've created the scaling unit, you'll see that now these actually represent the millimeters from on the max Y and the max X axes. So now they're actually representing something. And you can also see down in the position time curve, we're now talking about millimeters. So these are all things that I can report. I'm going to go ahead and take the graph back off because I don't use that when I digitize, as I said before. But now we're ready to digitize and go forward. There's a couple things that I do. First is I pretty much watch the video. I want to make sure the video looks good, and I want to make sure that there's no abnormalities in any of the gait patterns if I'm doing a running gait like this that I want to stay away from. So the way you can do that is as you saw there, I just had to play forward that button there. I can adjust my speed and slow it down if I want to, and I can also do the same going backwards. Also, these buttons here are increase or decrease, or so forward or backward by a single, and then these are go all the way to the end or go all the way to the beginning. I can also put my cursor over this red line and scroll it back and forth, or I can simply use the arrows on the keyboard. So these are all the ways that I can go from frame to frame, and you'll see right now I'm on the 7th frame, which represents the 1400th second of my video. So as we're ready to digitize, I'm going to click the digitize. I'm going to click the auto point, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click auto frame. Now I do auto frame because there's generally only a few. Keep in mind this is 1001 frames. I'm not going to digitize the entire 1001 frames, so I'm only going to digitize a certain area of it. Also, my markers don't have the best contrast to them, so the auto track feature won't pick up the majority of them. If you have great contrast markers and you can see them great throughout, I recommend using the auto track if you want to track digitize the entire length of your video. So now we're going to go and digitize. So I'm going to put the cursor right in the center, 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 and center. Now you'll see that it automatically went to the next frame. So I was on 5, now I'm on 6. And then you do it again. Let me go back because I don't want to digitize here, because this really isn't a point of interest for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a point of interest, which for me would be right there at foot contact. Right? So what I can do is, before I digitize, I'm going to go up here to this note tool. It's a really handy tool, and I'm going to double click over here in the corner, and I'm going to write FC, which represents my foot contact. So I'm going to call this my foot contact frame, and that's what it's going to call. As I hit enter, you see now that it has a black and yellow FC for my foot contact. If I hit this tool again, and say there's something I want to point out in this frame, maybe I'm pointing out some kind of degree inflection of this knee. I'm going to put wow flexion, and then it goes. You see the yellow line pointing at that. If I want to delete this, I can delete it, or I can copy the notes to all frames, and you can also edit it. But I'm going to delete this one. I don't need it. So what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to go, since this is my frame that I'm really interested in that starts my phase, I'm going to go a few frames ahead of that, and that's where I'm going to start digitizing. I'm doing this for the filtering aspect later on in your data analysis that you're going to do, and you'll understand that more once you get into more of the filtering aspect. But I'm going to turn my digitizing tool, and I'm going to go ahead and digitize a few of these. And there you go. So you see it moved on to the next frame. So I went ahead and digitized an entire stride. Let me show you. So you'll have the foot contact. Let me decrease the speed. Toe off to foot contact. So now you have entire stride from the right leg digitized with all the markers and angles. So one real tool I'm going to turn back on now is this graph, and I want you to be able to see. You have the four different four colors right there, and you'll have the keyed right over here. With the graph, you have the ability to do position time in both XY, velocity XY, acceleration XY. You can do your distances versus time and your angles versus time in this graph area. So this allows you to see where you've digitized the pattern of each of digitized points or angles along your process. Now I want to show you a couple things you can do to see what's going on. If I turn this, let me go ahead and turn this off. If you turn this on, you're going to see the path traveled by your digitized marker. This is the last path traveled by the marker. And if I continue to digitize more strides, you would see this would change along with each different stride. So whether more forward, more back, whether it's more narrow or thicker. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off at this point. The other thing I'm going to do is I like to have this on. This tells me while I'm visualizing this what frame I'm at, so I can see where I'm at and what my time is. It's just something I like personally to do. The other thing I want to show you right now is if I don't want to save this entire 20 seconds worth of data on my file, and I want to shrink the actual data file, there's a way I can do it with these two buttons right here. This is T sub 0, T sub 1, so time sub 0, time sub 1. I can actually shrink the file down to, if I want to only this point, create, so only the points of interest for me. So from frame 1 digitized to the last frame digitized. And you see what happens to my graph. Now I'm only doing 0.76 seconds. And here is my graph for you there. So I have now decreased down from 1001 to 38 frames. And I can save that for like that if I want to. But I'm going to go ahead and take it off just for purposes of, because I can show you some stuff during the save file aspect of it. So you can go back and forth and plot and see how you want to do that. And then a couple other options and tools for you to deal with are the point markers, and you can do it via here or you can do it right click on the pane. I like my markers. Let me scroll back. So I prefer these markers. They're the ones, circles white with the red lettering or numbering inside of it. But other point markers you can do a filled circle or an open circle. You can do a filled circle. You can do a cross. And you can also just not do any markers, just have it represented by the line. But I like to have mine with a number circle. It just allows me to have the contrast enough when I have the cursor to choose it. Here's also a quick toolbar that you can use. Right click and you have the zoom ability. Also the point markers, the more things you have on your screen, the more cluttered it gets around. But if you wanted to go ahead and look at the coordinates of your points, also their names, you have that ability. I usually keep those off only because it just creates a lot of noise and a lot of clutter within the area. Then if I go back up to the tools, there's a couple other tools here that we haven't gone over. You can interpolate your data, and you also can filter your data. You can project point, the body center of mass. We don't have enough segments to create the center of mass, but here's the filter screen for you. It's a filter type. You can do an average. You have all the different types of filters that you will go over and understand which one you want to use. So if I do a low pass, there's that one that opens up. Band pass, you have both, and a high pass, just the bottom high cutoff frequency. So depending on what you want to filter your data at, this is the drop down you would choose first, and then you would go ahead and choose the cutoff frequencies there for you as well. And it also, you have the ability here to just do the current point or to do all checked points. And I probably would do for myself all checked points, but that's for you to figure out and determine what's best fit for your data that you're doing. Interesting. All right, sorry about that. I don't know what I clicked, but so I went ahead and redigitized and opened it back up for you. So we're back to the where we were. But if I go into tools and I go down to my options, so this is going to give me the general options, and we'll get to all the different points. Tools, the tracking, recorder, but this is where you're going to get to the deinterlacing options. Right now I have mine set up as the BOB using the odd lines first. If I wanted to do even, you can change that. But if I wanted to change this, it's important to note that this change doesn't take effect until the next time you open a file. So if I had none, if I really wanted to have my file deinterlaced, I would have to close out that file and reopen that file. Then it would be a deinterlaced with whichever option I chose here. So this is where we're going to choose all this information from. So these are some more of the files you have there for you. Some of the final things I want to discuss with you are the saving options and why personally I would have you use these two buttons to create a larger or smaller data file. And so first thing you're going to do is you're going to go to save as. You always have to save as an MQF file. What that'll do is it'll save all of your digitized points for this file, so I can pull it back up and I won't have to redigitize it. It'll be redigitized. So go ahead and save that. And then I want to export this as an ASCII file. I want to export all my kinematic data as an ASCII file to either use in Maxmate or just to use in Excel or MATLAB. So what I want to do is do a drop down, do the ASCII, which is an MQA file. Then I want to go to this options. Now the options are very important because as you can see right now, I don't have include distances. If I went ahead and saved this, these include distance. The distance to that I have would not be reported in my data file. So if I want that, I go ahead and click it. So this is where you're going to click anything that you want to be shared: frame numbers, time offsets, columns, points, marker size. I'm really not worried about marker size, angles, and distances. This tab or comma separated, that's going to be how you're going to call it up when you import it to Maxtraq, Excel or Maxmate. This tells it how to separate the files in the individual cells of your file. So I'm going to hit OK, and I'm in the right spot, so I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And what I'm doing here is I'm not going to cut this down before or after, because I want to show you what happens to the data files if I don't cut it down. And then I also usually save, there's two other options you can save it as too that are become useful for you. The ABI file is going to create a video image of the video that you see here with the markers minus me talking over it. So if you want to use that kind of for presentation purposes, that would be what you would save there. And then you also have the C3D file. A lot of my MATLAB code that I write uses C3D file. It's just a little bit more easy, manageable for me and what I'm used to. So on my codes, I have C3D files, so that's what I would use. But let's go ahead and just get out of this. I'll make sure we saved it as an ASCII. Nope. Okay, so we're good. Cancel that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pull up one of the data files in Excel so you can see what that looks like. So if you've never done this before, you go to Data, You're going to go from text, so you're going to import the data from text. It's going to ask you from where, so you just got to find out where it's from. And it's all files. It's not a txt file. So the text file is a .txt, and these are not. These are ASCII files, so I need to go and find it through that. And this is going to be the MQA file. So then it asks you, and this is where the delimited comes from. So it's next, and it's going to ask you. So we had tab delimited, and it's really easy to see here because it's all separated by lines. Next, just follow the prompts, and it's going to ask you where you want to put it. Yep. And so this is what your file is going to look like. On the very top, the very first row is all going to be your individual variables. So you have X and Y of thigh, knee, ankle, and toe. And because I created my template, every data file that I have using that template is going to be in this sequence: thigh, knee, ankle, and toe. If I did do that, and maybe I mixed the toe and ankle, I need to know which files the toe and ankle are reversed. This is your frame. Now keep in mind the frame doesn't coincide with the cell row of Excel because I have this column on the very first top, which is all my headers, and then you have your time in that frame. So this is where not reducing my video image down to my digitized points becomes known. So you'll see all the points here are places where I did not digitize. So starting with, we'll go and scroll over, frame 18 is where I started my digitization, and I ended it on frame 58. What you'll see for the angles and distances is there's a -1, so it puts a -1 in there. So if I'm using this and I'm writing code, I need to do something that is going to write code that determines that from this row 17 to row 18 is where I want to begin my data collection or my analyses. So you just do like a greater than, like a threshold in your code. But if I had deleted it, then none of this would be here, and I would not have to worry about that in my code, and I would have just and this would all be gone because you see it's all through the end as well. So you can't just do a length until end on your code. You'd have to somehow set it off here, and you can go through. But you'll see on the very top, these are my two distances. If I did not click that distance, I wouldn't have those two markers. Okay. And for at this point, I believe that would be all that I would have to talk to you about at this time. So if you have any questions on how to use Maxtraq, the importance of Maxtraq, and what you can take from Maxtraq. Oh, the one other thing I just looked up and I saw this print screen. You can take a snapshot. So as I'm on this image right here, if I wanted to use this image for a presentation purpose as my foot contact to show them what I'm represented as foot contact, you can do that and save that file as well. So that's another cool tool you can do. But thank you for listening to me, and all's well.